Procurement notices, funding and grants opportunities, lists of potential partners, insights into market trends, databases of development professionals, webinars, latest news, and much more. Don't just be active in international development, thrive in it. Stay informed and connected. Visit developmentaid.org today and see how we can help you achieve your sustainable development goals together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Development Aid Dialogues, the podcast where we speak directly with the people working to rethink how aid development and sustainability actually function in practice. I'm your host, Hisham Allam. Today, we are looking at a bold idea that sits right at the intersection of two major global pressures: economic debt and environmental collapse. Around the world, many developing nations are drowning in external debt, some paying more in interest than they spend on health or education. At the same time, climate change and biodiversity loss are accelerating, with few reliable financing solutions on the table. But what if one problem could help solve the other? That is the promise and the challenge of debt for nature swaps, a mechanism where part of a country's debt is forgiven in return for serious environmental commitments. Some say it could free up billions for conservation and climate resilience. Others warn it is a complex, often poorly executed tool with limited reach. To make sense of what is real, what is possible, and what is next, we are joined by Sawsan Bou Fakhreddine, the Director General of Lebanon's Association for Forest Development and Conservation and a Senior Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture in Lebanon. For over 2 decades, she worked at the crossroads of environmental policy, sustainable land use, and disaster risk reduction across the Middle East. Her experience brings depth and clarity to a topic that is gaining attention, but still not well understood. Sawsan, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Hisham. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you. Sawsan, let's begin by setting the scene. To those new to this concept, how exactly does a debt for nature swap work? And why is it becoming a popular topic among both environmentalists and finance experts?
Actually, this concept has been growing lately, and we've seen that in many countries, as you said in your introduction, because simply it's an opportunity maybe for some developing countries to revert or to recover its debt for that has it within the a severe financial crisis that they are witnessing. It's like financial agreement where part of developing countries' external debt, as you said, is forgiven or maybe returned to for a commitment where the government or the developing country can seriously commit and can do at national level some conservation and long-term and sustainable conservation projects within the country, which would reflect later on climate change, land degradation, and many things. Actually, it's a smart concept. However, as you said, there are many burdens for this, especially in developing countries like Lebanon, for instance, and we are going maybe to discuss this more in detail. But generally speaking, I think the concept raised within searching for climate fund. It is in response to face climate change and the impact of climate change on our ecosystems. And as you said in the introduction, if we compare the level or the degree of degradation of land and ecosystems and natural resources is way faster than recovery or restoration. So what we lose in one day, for instance, in a wildfire would need like a decade or more to be restored if we are able to restore it. Because as you said, those countries are in debt simply because they have a crisis and they don't have enough resources to invest in sustainability and in vital sector. And when it comes to environment, it's not always the priority to invest and put real actual investment in the environment and in the protection of natural resources, because there are many other sectors that are critical, like education, health, economy. So it's all related. The importance of this mechanism, if applied, is to bring attention to the economic value of ecosystems and the natural resources.
Sawsan, we have seen projections that these swaps could unlock up to $100 billion for nature restoration and climate adaptation. In your view, what is the real-world potential of this mechanism in today's fragile economic and ecological landscape?
I think there are a lot of potentials. However, it is relative. It is relative to the area, to the country, to the level of political will. Before I talk about political will, I will talk about political decision maker awareness about the impact of the deterioration of our ecosystems. Unfortunately, decision makers, they are not aware of that. And that's why they are not taking serious action. They are not taking it because they don't see it in figures. So I think if we manage to valorize the ecosystems and like put a dollar value for the land degradation on different sectors, not only on the environment, but the impact of this ecosystem deterioration on health and economy, I think then they would start really trying to understand this kind of concept, and they will see in it an opportunity. Because as you said, it's a win-win for the government that is in debt. It is a great opportunity for them to reduce the debt that they have. And at the same time, they can create something sustainable that can create around it many economic opportunities and can improve livelihoods and the quality of life. So there are a lot of potentials, but I think we are still not ready because we lack this kind of awareness and exactly the know-how and the actual value of ecosystems.
At what level? Who doesn't have this knowledge?
If you talk about the concept of debt for nature swap, the concept I can think it's at all levels. At the government level, they don't see it as an opportunity, and there is not much work has been done at the higher political level. So, for instance, I'll give an example here in Lebanon. If I talk to the highest authority who put policies and legislations, so if I tell them now about this concept, they say, they don't know about it. So there is misunderstanding about it. You have also at the level of lower administrations working on putting strategies and plans. We've been thinking lately about climate change in a very conventional way, like we are looking for a green climate fund. We work a little bit about carbon trade, but still the concept of debt for nature swap is not yet highlighted enough at the government level. And then even if I talk about NGOs or lower level, like local communities, local authorities, it's still a concept that is growing in the developing countries, although we have seen many successful examples in many countries where they turn this into opportunity. But it started with the political will and the political decision that they want to do that. It's complex, as you said in your introduction. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a bit complicated when it comes to this kind of swaps. And I see that the problem lies at different levels, but starting by raising awareness about this concept and what is the added value of it.
I agree that many developing countries are biodiversity rich, like Lebanon, but governance poor. How serious are the governance and institutional capacity gaps when implementing these agreements?
Actually, since you talk about Lebanon, you know that developing countries are still developing because they have witnessed a lot of crises for the last decades. And this stopped them from developing good governance structure and to think about future and to think really about sustainability and scalability of things. So poor governance is, I think, the first burden or first threat against not only for this concept, but for everything. Because even if I tell you about simple, before we talk about this kind of initiative, the swap, if you talk just about the strict protection in actions, like if we have to put policies to stop fires, for instance, it's one example, one threat existing a lot in the Mediterranean region in general and in Lebanon in specific. Although we have strategies and we have plans at the government level to try to limit this threat, because we have very poor and very weak governance structure, we are not able to implement even those strategies. We have a lot of laws like the forest law, the ecosystem conservation conventions that we have signed for. We signed almost all the conventions, the DRR, SDGs, the Paris Agreement, Biodiversity Convention. However, we don't have the tools, the good governance to implement those strategies. So our poor governance is really a problem against any kind of really sustainable improvement. In the developing countries, there is no continuity of operations or continuity of decisions when you have succession in the administrations. So this is another problem, and this is due because we have poor governance. And this is not only in the environmental sector, but in different sectors we have this problem. And this is also related to the economic situation, political situation, security situation. For many years we didn't have a government, so the situation is boiling. We always have something important, but there is something more important, which is the security, the livelihood of people. And so this kind of situation, recurrent situation, are also weakening the government and weakening any opportunity to put sound governance structure and to work toward achieving it. Because for the last 10 years, we've been in a crisis mode. We're just responding to the crisis and trying to adapt and respond to those kind of urgent needs that arise from each crisis.
That is clear, but what impact do these swaps have on rural or traditional communities that depend heavily on natural resources?
Actually, the impact is huge, especially if we are talking about communities in areas in countries rich with biodiversity. You can see by all natural resources, there are a lot of projects and that are economically beneficial for the community. If we talk about agroforestry, if we talk about ecotourism, if we talk about traction sites. So everything is around those areas, and land degradation and not having this kind of swap is contributing to the loss of those areas and subsequently is leading to losses at the economic level. And this is affecting a lot the community because they live from these resources. And not only about ecotourism, when we talk about apiculture, when we talk about people living from harvesting of aromatic and medicinal plants, when we talk about people living from fruit stones, trees, from wood, from many derivatives and products that can be collected and harvested from those ecosystems. So of course, this is affecting a lot, but the thing is that it is not seen very clear. It's like progressive. And that's why it's never been an emergency for the government, because the impact of this kind of deterioration is gradual. So you cannot see it directly. And again, it's because we lack a lot in this aspect. We lack a lot for figures and numbers, like evidence about the impact by numbers of this on the communities. And again, when you don't have clear figures, you cannot convince decision makers, because from my experience, when you don't have clear studies and researches and evidence-based material to showcase with decision makers, you cannot break through and you cannot make a change.
Speaking about decision makers and governments, some experts warn about the risk of corruption and elite capture in fragile states. How can we design mechanisms to ensure transparency and accountability in swap-funded projects?
Actually, to have successful swaps, it relies on strong governance. And strong governance means to have really a real mechanism for showing transparency in the whole process, from beginning by the selection of the areas to be protected, by the initiatives, by the people who will be working there. And it's not only about one administration. There should be like an independent oversight bodies with civil society representation overseeing this kind of projects that can publish and monitor and disseminate information and talk with the communities. So there should be somebody independent from the people who take decision and who make the plans.
Sawsan, given that valuation is crucial, how do we even begin to quantify the economic value of nature in negotiations that pick ecosystems against dollar figures?
Actually, in some areas, it's easy because when you look at an ecosystem, you have to value the ecosystem services. Like when I have a forest, if I calculate this forest, how many people from the community are benefiting from it? What are the services provided by this ecosystem to the community, to the local economy, to the national economy? And there are a lot of examples and studies in that. Like now in Lebanon, we have studies about 1 hectare of pine trees, how much it can generate income, about the different kind of landscapes, and even for agroforestry projects, we can have these numbers. So the idea is to partner with academic institutions and with entities that can provide this kind of valorization. The most difficult part is to valorize the carbon, but however, now we have some modules that we can adopt and to valorize the carbon capture in those ecosystems, not only in the above the ground, like we can also valorize the carbon in the soil. There are many ways and tools, and we are adopting and using this. In Lebanon, have been many workshops where we've seen different modalities on how we can valorize the economic value of ecosystems. And this is important for the decision makers. So this is the corner step where we can start to convince the decision makers to do this kind of swaps and to identify which areas are more important to be protected in terms of biodiversity conservation, about the socioeconomic impact, and where we can guarantee sustainability.
How can we make sure these programs do not just protect nature, but also improve livelihoods and address poverty in affected regions? Is it possible?
It is possible simply by applying this rule. Never bring to the community a ready-made project. Consult, and consult, because they are the owner of the land. They live there. They benefit from the service of the ecosystem. And from our also long experience in wildfire management, where we were able to succeed is where we built a trust with the local community. We convince them what is the value of this ecosystem, and it's a continuous operation. It's not by force. It should be by consensus. It should be by clear understanding of the community about the value of this ecosystem and the risk affecting this ecosystem before doing any kind of intervention, to really understand the risk and the hazards existing and to see it from the perspective of the community, not from my perspective as a technician or practitioner in the field. No, I have to see it from their eyes. And when we do this, we can reduce this kind of resistance by the community. For instance, now in Lebanon, I can give example. When you talk that you want to make a protected area, some communities would feel a lot of resistance. However, the government was clever enough to put different kind of protection schemes. It's not only a protected area. It shouldn't be closed to the community. To the contrary, they should be partners in this protection. They should be within the strategic plan and the management. And there are many different kind of management schemes that we can use that is suitable for the community. So in this sense, we don't have one rule that applies for all. No, it should be tailored for each community by itself, considering its culture, its socioeconomic aspect, its attachment to the ecosystem itself, and how much they are reliant on this ecosystem in their livelihood.
Moving away from this, how do things like market ups and downs or changes in debt value affect these swaps? Do they make the process more risky or less effective?
Actually, yes, the fluctuation is an important risk factor because there are also different modalities when doing these swap projects. Sometimes it's directly from government to government. Sometimes you can have like creditors and like investors working on that as an opportunity also for them. So this kind of fluctuation can create a risk, and this is also associated, and it should be in the business plan. Of course, this I think make the investors a bit hesitant to make this kind of investment, if we call it like this, in developing countries, because as I said from the beginning, it's not stable. Currency fluctuation, security, stability, the governance also. So of course it's directly affected, and it is, I think, one of the risks why still in the developing countries we are not moving forward in this kind of things. I know that Egypt started doing something, but I'm not sure how much, to which extent.
Let me ask you, following up on that, political instability can also disrupt even the best laid plans. Is there a risk that long-term conservation commitments will not survive changes in government or rising conflict?
If you don't have clear laws and strategies to regulate this, of course it won't sustain. It's not only about the decision of one government. It should be embedded in the development strategies, in the sector strategies. And when we talk about this kind of swaps, we are talking about long-term commitment to be sustainable. So, of course, political challenge and conflicts as well are critical. As we were saying from the beginning, is the cornerstone. The political will is, and not only the will that go alongside with written, endorsed, recognized rules and regulations and policies and strategies, and with budget. Because, for instance, in Lebanon, we have a lot of strategies and we have a lot of policies and frameworks and you name it. However, we don't have budget for it. So the government has to commit a budget for this kind of projects. So far, we are a little bit far because of this political instability and the conflicts that we are facing. Another way to maybe overcome this is maybe to apply decentralization. So we can take decisions and make policies and strategies not only at the government level. Like, for instance, if we have an area where we can commit to protect in a swap project, maybe we can come up with a local or mechanism with the local authorities that can guarantee its success. And in this way, we can minimize the disruption of the national political instability or the conflicts. So this is a way to adapt to this, but it should be case by case.
This leads to a broader question. What role should multilateral donors and development banks play in scaling up and supervising debt for nature swap frameworks?
First of all, of course, they can be funders. They can fund this project to assist the government. And in developing countries, they can also be like brokers. They can facilitate negotiation between the government in debt and the other government that can do the swap with. They can also, as you said, they can oversee the swap. They can be as monitors. They can play a very important role in overseeing the whole process and secure transparency. This kind of monitoring, it's crucial because it can bring more funds. So if you start with a small swap project and if you were successful and you shown an example that is recognized by the international community as an adaptation project, I think this can bring more investment and more money to be invested by the multilateral donors. And of course, they can make some guarantees to minimize the risk. So they have a wide range of contribution that they can make. But for the developing countries, I think the role would be crucial as funders, because initially we started our talk by saying that developing countries, they lack financial resources. So to commit in this kind of swap, they would need support and loans, grants, or they can just be funded by multilateral donors.
One powerful insight you shared was about the importance of community inclusion in designing these swaps. What does meaningful inclusion look like in practice?
In practice, as I mentioned, it should be starting by designing the project together with the community, like a local protection measure with the local authority to protect an area from wildfire. So, and we have a lot of successful examples in Lebanon, and AFDC last year was recognized as one of the UN Decade flagship for best practice in the Mediterranean in restoration of ecosystems. And we applied this prototype with the community that we are now moving to other areas in the country to build the same kind of approach with the communities. It starts first, Hisham, by really sitting with the community and doing everything from scratch, from zero, like doing the mapping of resources together with the community, identifying the risks and the hazards. So we do field and risk and hazard assessment of the natural resource that we want to protect. And together with the community, we identify who are the stakeholders mainly involved in managing this ecosystem, whether they have negative impact or positive impact. And for that, once we identify the risk and the hazards and we identify stakeholders, we come up with what we call prevention action plan, where we put like adaptation measures and interventions to prevent the risk from happening, like our initiatives to protect the land. In the case of forest fires, for instance, we identify where we have to make like fire prevention lines. We do work with the farmers. We do work with the people who have access to the forest. So a lot of activities are tailored based on the needs of the community. And we make sure in the whole process is whatever local governance structure we want to put or suggest, it should be applicable. It is accepted by the community. There is no dispute about it. Because even in small community, you might have disputes in politics and interest. So whatever we have to propose it and to be compatible and agreed about by all the community. Because it's very easy to sabotage a natural ecosystem, very easy to put a fire. And I'm being very honest, in many places we didn't succeed because we weren't able to have this kind of commitment from the whole community, despite of all the other disputes and other disagreement about many things. And we have to be transparent with them. So they should understand the community. The community, to go with you in long-term commitment, they should see the start and the end of the project. So all the steps should be clear. We don't have to make it beautiful. We have to let them see things as it is. And this is what we do in our intervention in the community. And after we do this, of course, we need to empower them. So we did the assessment. We identified what we want to do, who will do what. And we put like a scheme together about the management, a vision, how we want it to be done. But now comes the capacities. So if you want to implement it, you have to make sure that you have the capacity to do it, technical and financial. And for this, we make like capacity building for the community about the plan that we have put together. So we try to provide the minimal requirement to implement the plan, because it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous, not a little bit. It's very dangerous just to make a plan and leave the community. It won't, you lose the momentum. So when we decide to work in any community, we make sure that we have the resources, we have the capacity to do it till the end. And otherwise, we don't do it. Like, for instance, in forest fires, when we do all this and we identify fire risk area, we establish what we call first responders teams. We bring in the project, we have funds to train, equip local groups who are like firefighters who can intervene at the minute they detect a smoke in the area, who are first responders. They can extinguish the fire like within 10 or 15 minutes. And that way, you don't have expanded fire in the region. So if you don't have the capacity, we don't do it. I don't go to a community, I tell them, listen, you have to make a forest fire management plan, but I don't equip them or I don't train them. So this is crucial for working on that. So we guarantee it's sustainable, because now we have like communities where we already have established mechanism, as I said, and now our intervention is minimal. We don't work with them, we just follow up with them, and we are supportive to them in case they need any technical assistance, but it's a standing alone mechanism. And at the local level, they are managing to do it. And the nice thing about this mechanism is that those first responders teams that we establish with the community, they are responding not only to natural events, they respond to any crisis in the community, and they become like an important asset for them. And this is why the community are holding them and they are helping them to grow and to keep them sustainable, because they are serving the whole community.
You made it clear and clean as well. Sawsan, I'm curious about the models that blend the public debt, restructuring the private sector investment, that could make this tool more powerful.
I'm sure that if we engage private sector investment, it would be very helpful, like especially in the big private sector companies who have they are committed to climate change adaptation. And this is a growing movement, by the way, in worldwide. And even in Lebanon, you can see a lot of now of private sector, they are investing in sustainable projects, and this is returning in good for them. So this combination, this pairing between public and private partnership I think it's important, and it's a way out for the government that is in debt.
In your view, what is the biggest misconception about debt for nature swaps among policymakers or even the public?
There is a weak understanding about the concept. So they say it's like symbolic. It's not something that is efficient, but because there is lack of awareness about it. So they don't know the mechanism, how it works, who regulates it, what are the rules, the policies, how we should do this, who will be involved. So that's why till now, there is a lot of misconception about it and this kind of swap. But again, with good awareness about it and more talks, maybe more conferences with the ministries concerned, more valorization of the economic value, I think can bridge this gap and can really show this swap can really impact many sectors at a time. It's not only an environmental project. No, it's a project that can benefit the communities, the economy, the social well-being, and even the health, because we have a bill that we are paying on the health-related issues because of climate change. So it's interrelated, and we have to build this concept with the decision makers and with the people as well.
Finally, if you had to draft a minimum checklist for a successful swap, what would be on the list?
The first one, as I said from the beginning, is the political will. And there should be a political commitment. Otherwise, it won't help if I work on it. It should come up to bottom approach. There should be a mechanism to manage the fund. Especially in developing countries, some may question transparency and the structure of the government. There should be like legal text and regulations that put the standards, the norms, and can guide projects. Should be clear, recognized by the highest authority in the government, by the council, by the parliaments, by the ministers, the highest authorities, legal and institutional setups. There should be a strategy, maybe, I think, or something like a master plan where the government should put a clear target. Like, for instance, in Lebanon, we have the SDCs, the country program for climate change. So maybe this can be a good start, but we have to put more clear and tangible target that we need to achieve. We really need to apply in the checklist the approach that I was talking about, the real engagement of community inclusion and benefit sharing. So it's not a project for an investor. It's not a project for the government. It should be a project for the community that everybody should benefit from. Otherwise, it will be stopped and it won't be sustainable. There should be an independent monitoring and reporting mechanism. It shouldn't stand alone. It should be based on the national indicators and strategies in place that are endorsed by the government. And I think maybe some work on good special communication with potential multilateral donors. And there should be alignment as well with the international agendas, which is driving also multinational donors to put their fund in the countries. We should have like a sustainability plan that is independent from the political disturbances, from conflicts. Otherwise, it won't be successful. So I think those main ideas, if we manage to do them, I think we can achieve a good debt for nature swap project.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Development Aid Dialogues. A warm thank you to Sawsan Bou Fakhreddine for helping us explore both the promise and the complexity of debt for nature swaps. What we have here today is that these mechanisms are not a silver bullet, but when built on transparency, strong institutions, and the local ownership, they can open up real space for progress. As global debt and ecological crisis converge, tools like these may become not just useful, but necessary. If this conversation sparked ideas, questions, or debates, don't keep them to yourself. Share within your network and subscribe for more. Until next time, I'm Hisham Allam. Thank you for listening and keep questioning what development should really look like. Stay engaged, stay tuned. Goodbye.